Welcome back to the Shawna Show. Today I am honored to introduce you to my personal chiropractor, Dr. Nick, and I'm going to have him introduce himself. Dr. Nick?
Hi, good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Nick Gamboris, and I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I want to tell you guys the story of how I met Dr. Nick. Well, I met him in his practice. I was referred to him from my fiance's mom because he did wonders for her carpal tunnel. And I went to him with chronic migraine. I had had growing chronic migraine for maybe like 5 years, and it just continued to get worse. And I saw a chiropractor most of that time. Right when they started, I was seeing a chiropractor. I think I saw him for 2 or 3 years. And then there was a short bit where I wasn't seeing anybody. And then I saw somebody for a little bit. And then I was searching around and I found Dr. Nick. And I have so much to say. The first chiropractor I went to was great. I loved him. He was the first time I consistently went to chiropractic care. I was just getting over the Crohn's disease diagnosis and all the other health issues I had, and he really supported me and helped me a lot. Didn't support the migraines though. We couldn't seem to figure that out. And I went to another chiropractor. He was good. And then I met Dr. Nick, and maybe it's just the vibe that I like, but I feel like he sees so good with his hands, and he's grown over his practice over time, that the type of intuition that you wish for with like a massage therapist or a chiropractor or anybody who's like hands-on healing. And I just instantly knew that you could do that because I'm aware of my body, so I could tell. So that was great. And then I learned through a different guy that I was watching online that there's a difference between migraines and cervicogenic headaches. And it blew my damn mind, because this whole time I was trying to treat these migraines, which maybe, still play a role because I had them so chronically. But cervicogenic headaches, from what I understand, is something that happens when there's a misalignment in the neck, and the migraine stems from the cervical spine. And I made a video on it on TikTok, and it's now up to like 2.4 million views, and I have thousands and thousands of people saying that they never heard this before. Their doctors are just trying to throw more medication on them. They were getting surgeries, they're getting fusions, they're getting all these things. And after we started treating it like cervicogenic headaches, I started exercising and strengthening my back. I saw I wouldn't say rapid improvement, but I saw improvement enough to keep me going. And it's been like over a year now, and I'm 95% better. So I'd like to just chat about that for a minute, because I think like 15% of the population has migraine. That might be like 8% of the population has chronic migraine. And when I talk about it, people always want to know more. So I want to chat about that. And then I also want to say I'm so excited to have him here, because I get in his office and he's always so open to chat with me and always asking me if I have more questions. And I'm the most awkward I've ever been when I go into his office, because I want to sit down and talk to him like I am right here, and he's so open and willing to talk, and he just talks, and you want him to tell you a story because he talks so beautifully. And so I'm awkward, and he asks me if I have questions, and I kind of just bow out, and I'm like, not right now, and I just go out. So I'm very excited to chat with him today. So if we could just, anything to say about the migraine stuff, and also my medical history from what we've worked together is completely open to talk about.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. I want to go back to what you were talking about, seeing with your hands. That's so important in the chiropractic profession, because it's truly seeing with your hands. One of the first things that we learned in school is to be able to find what is called the subluxation. And the subluxation is exactly misalignment or a misplacement of a joint when it moves out of its normal position and eventually puts stress on a nerve. That is what we call subluxation, which is very different from a dislocation. A dislocation is exactly that. It separates and it moves far away from where it should be, and usually involves tearing or damage of a ligament or tendon that holds it in place. A subluxation is a very subtle misalignment, but it's enough that the body will recognize it and create either or mild, moderate, severe, or really intense pain. And it can develop into muscle spasms and nerve impingements. And then the patient will start to develop ergonomics that correlate with trying to correct for that nerve impingement. And then you start developing poor posture. And then it keeps going from there. And then you start having abnormal stress on a joint, and arthritis develops, and other damage develops, and abnormal wear and tear in the joint develops. It all started from that subluxation, which is exactly what chiropractors treat. And so it took the privilege of at least 6 years of education, postgraduate education, before we can identify and adjust and manipulate under the supervision of our clinicians a subluxation on a patient and beyond from that point. And there took some painstaking times to be able to understand and recognize how to find that subluxation, because we're truly, as you mentioned, seeing with your hands. It's kind of like taking someone who has a vision impairment and is learning to read Braille. It takes some skill to be able to practice and learn and understand that language. And it's the same skill that as a chiropractor we use to identify, find, and treat a subluxation. And you build that sensitivity in your hands. Now we're talking about also innate intelligence with the body, right? Our body is meant to be able to repair itself, and we just give it a little bit of a helping hand. When a patient comes with a complaint, like you mentioned, migraines, it is really important to identify and create the most appropriate diagnosis. So when you see your chiropractor is trained just as a medical physician to identify the problem and create a diagnosis. So yeah, we have to make sure there are no real serious things going on, like tumors in the brain or a blood vessel that's going to burst. That's really important to identify that, and that is not a chiropractic problem to treat. And that is a chiropractic physician's job to identify it and refer it to the appropriate physician that is going to treat it in that specialty. And once we rule out those serious things, then we go on to the serious thing that we treat, and which is spinal subluxation or joint subluxation. Because as you had mentioned, it's not just the spine that we treat, we also can treat shoulders and elbows and wrists and knees and feet and ankles. So identifying the most appropriate diagnosis is step one. 2, it is important for the practitioner to be in tune as well, because we're not only just manipulating a joint, but we're also working with energy too. That's really important. As you mentioned, there's a vibe. So if I'm having a bad day, I guarantee you I'm not going to treat that patient as well as if I'm having a good day, because that energy travels through us into the patient. So being able to focus and give that patient all of you, and being able to identify the problem and then focus on it and treat it, it's really important. It's a very important part of the practice, which does make the difference between one practitioner to the next. And you can feel it in their hands. That's really important, which is where the whole name of chiropractic came from. Chiropractic is a Greek term that means the practice of using the hands.
Interesting.
And that's how chiropractic is identified.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's palpable, that connected energy. And I would assume that some people probably don't like that. That some people might be turned off by that, and they just want like the very, the certain type of practitioner that is not less connected and not can't see with their hands, but I've worked with some people who are just maybe less spiritually connected or energetically connected. Do you know what I mean? Like there's some people in all practices of healing that it's just they're a little less connected to you, and they're a little more just connected to the science of the work. So I really appreciated that. And you had said something.
If I might interject for a moment, you were talking about yourself and the migraines and the difference between a migraine and a cervicogenic headache. So if I can just take a moment and just talk about that a little bit. There are so many, literally hundreds of causes of head pain, right? So a cervicogenic headache means exactly that. It's generated by the cervical spine. It's generated in the neck. So there's a problem here, and the body doesn't like it because there's an irritant of something, and it causes referred pain to go into the head. So for example, and this is scientifically identified, right underneath the back of the skull, that's called your suboccipital area. The suboccipital area has three main muscles in it, and it's called your suboccipital triangle. And right in the middle of it is called the suboccipital nerve. If there is an impingement there of some type, whether it's a strained muscle or a subluxated joint or some swollen tissue from trauma, if it causes impingement of the nerve, that becomes very painful in the back of the head, and then it'll refer pain right behind the eye. That's an identifiable trigger point, which is muscle that's bound up, and it's irritating that area. It causes referred pain right behind the eye.
I feel it right now.
There are other...
It might be like a 1 on the scale, but I know. You're talking, and I'm like, right there. He's talking about right there.
Yeah. And other patients, you know, there are other places around the back of the head, the cervical spine, that will cause referred pain to the forehead, or will cause pain in the temples, or will cause pain on the top of the head. And all of these things are important to gather when you're doing your evaluation, your history, and it helps you to look a little bit further to identify the source of the problem. Okay, so we have, for example, a tight suboccipital area, and it's causing some pain behind the eye. What we've been taught for years is to do something like, well, let's throw a little ibuprofen at it. Okay, ibuprofen's a great drug, and it'll help to calm down the inflammation, and it'll calm down the headache. But the problem isn't the lack of ibuprofen. The problem is it's in the suboccipital area. So it'll taper that down, maybe even completely for that moment, but the next time something tips it over the edge, like a stressful day, it's going to come back. So we throw a little ibuprofen at it. And over time, that just continues to degenerate, and it continues to become a problem and rot in the back of the head. And then that problem never goes away, and it just creates and cascades into other conditions and other problems. And so identifying it and treating it is really appropriate, and it is very important in order to get rid of the problem and then manage it correctly, such as with good postural exercises, improved ergonomics, etc.
You bring up a good point, I think, and a hilarious point when I heard it for the first time, when people are talking about, even in natural healing we'll see this. So your example was ibuprofen, like you don't have an ibuprofen deficiency, and like fill that in the blank with any other prescription, or even like curcumin, like we don't have a curcumin deficiency. If you're taking it every day, I think there's maybe some, me personally, it's like maybe there's some inflammation going on if you're taking it for pain. And I think that it's interesting to think about that, because we're not taught to think about that. We're taught to just like get rid of the pain. We're not taught to let the pain speak to you, which I think was really important for me on my migraine journey. Is I had the opportunity, I had tried 2 different meds. One was a normal medicine they give for migraines. The other one was second tier med they give for migraines. The second one gave me really like suicidal thoughts. So I got off of that in like 2 weeks. So my next step, I could have like gotten Botox and gotten some other treatment that they give, but I didn't want to stop the pain, because then I wouldn't have the motivation to do the exercises and to keep figuring out what's actually going on if I cover up those symptoms. And maybe that's just me, and like other people would want to cover the pain, so they do exercise. I know myself in a different way, and if that pain was gone, I would just be like, oh, this is great. I'm just gonna like be on my computer and not actually have it in my mind. So
some people have let me rephrase. Some people have experienced and have dealt with these kind of symptoms for such a long time, or they have so much going on in their life and everything is so flared up, their stress levels are through the roof. You know, they need something to help break that cycle.
I agree.
And something like a Botox injection, it could be appropriate, you know, for a condition like that, for a situation like that. Let's break the cycle, calm things down, help the patient's body rest, let them get good sleep, and we break down that cycle so that we can get to the source of the problem. Same thing with cortisone injections. You know, if there's a patient that's so flared up and in so much pain, and what it is that chiropractic can offer is difficult for that patient at that moment because they're so intensely spastic that we could use a little bit of help and speed up the healing process. So we can refer them to a specialist and get an injection of cortisone, calm the area down, and have them come back and start working on the source of the problem. So always we try to reach for a solution without synthetics, but synthetics are there for a reason. And it's good that they are. That's how medicine advances.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because the reason that I took that second prescription was because I was at my wit's end and I wanted relief. And I do believe that if I didn't find a road down cervicogenic headache that gave me some hope, I probably would have gotten the Botox. So I'm glad you said that. And I don't want to come off shaming anybody who decides to take prescriptions. They help me heal my Crohn's disease, and now I'm off them. So, but I did know that if I would have gotten the Botox after we figured out the problem and I started seeing improvements, just because it would have been easy, that it would have taken me away from my, it's almost like that pain, I needed that pain to tell me to get up, do your exercises, get up and do your exercises. Yes, I absolutely agree. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was, what is your opinion? So in my case, we're fixing the cervical spine. A really important piece of that was strength training. I've since finished the initial 6 weeks or whatever of the coming in 3 days a week. And now I'm just working on fixing that strength, fixing that cervical spine. And then I see him if I have any issues, which I still do maybe once or twice a month. And I was having them daily. So that is a huge improvement. And I'm wondering, when we're talking about energy, when we're speaking about energy, and we could call it migraines, but I know this probably could be laid over everything. If we're doing the exercises and we're getting the adjustments, do you see a pattern do you see mental personality patterns in people who still just can't get it to that 100%? Because part of me feels like I'm so hyper aware of my body. I'm constantly analyzing where my neck is going, what I'm doing, that maybe I'm just giving myself tension.
Oh boy, yeah, that's a really important thing to bring up. Have you heard of a diagnosis called fibromyalgia?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Fibromyalgia, again, the stem of the word means muscle pain. And it's a diagnosis that's given to patients really when you can't figure out why they're in so much pain. But there's a guideline that you follow. There are 18 points around the body, and if you put some pressure on it and it causes pain at a certain pressure level, it can be measured with an instrument. It would be positive for that point, and if you're positive for 11 out of 18 points by the standards set thereforth, you can diagnose that patient with fibromyalgia.
Can I pause you? So just to repeat so I'm clear, you're pressing on all these points, and if there's pain in a certain amount of points, that could be positive.
If you put, for example, I'm just going to use a number. If I use an instrument and I can put 1.5 pounds of pressure or more and there's no pain, then it's a negative point.
Okay.
If I push on it and there's pain and there's less than that amount of pressure on it, that's a positive point. If I have 11 positive points, it would be considered a positive diagnosis for fibromyalgia.
Okay.
And all of these points are identified throughout the body. For example, in the middle of the calf,
Okay.
that would be one of those points. So the story is that many in my experience, patients who have fibromyalgia also have high emotional stress. And emotional stress, it's a very popular thing that we're learning now. It's all over social media, high cortisol levels. When your adrenaline glands are firing because you have so much stress, it releases lots of cortisol and it creates a lot of inflammation in our body. So it's important to evaluate yourself and see, do I have high stress? Do I have high anxiety? Am I feeling depressed frequently? Am I worried all the time? Do I have a lot of fear? Those kinds of things will manifest and develop into systemic pain. So no matter how many times I see them as a chiropractor and give chiropractic adjustments or however many massages, if that problem doesn't resolve, then it's going to always stay inflamed and painful. Like, we can kind of curb the symptoms down a little bit, and that's important to help them get through their daily routines. But to get them to a point of great health, they've also got to work on that part of it, which is the emotional stress part of it. That's a really important piece.
Which isn't, and this is the conversation I love, it's not the emotional stress, but our response to that emotional stress? Or is it simply this person has a lot going on? Because it's, as I've looked into the stress disease connection, what I find fascinating is how person A has the same issues as person B, but the processing is different, and then the symptoms come out. And I think, as I'm listening to this, as a viewer, and as a person I used to be, I would hear you say that, and I would hear you say this person has a lot of stress going on in their lives, and it's presenting in the body in these ways, and we have to deal with that stress. I would hear it and be like, well, I am stressed out of my mind. Of course I have these symptoms, and I would take that almost with a victim mindset of like, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm stressed, whatever the reasons may be, work, kids. And I would just sort of absorb that identity. And I'm wondering if that's what you're seeing. If it's not, yes, maybe we want to remove some stressful things. Yes, if you're in an abusive relationship or a toxic job, we want to get rid of those things. But ultimately, does that boil down to our relationship and our processing of what's actually happening in our lives?
Yes. For example, there could be a parent or a spouse that suddenly passes. Let's take a spouse. That's a younger person. That's a lot more stressful. It's unexpected, right? This is your partner in life. There's two people that have had that happen to. Person A and person B. Person A can work through their grieving, but also be able to maintain a job, handle the home, handle the family, and be able to continue to be social, and is not experiencing insomnia, etc. Person B, they can't function. They are requesting meds to calm them down. They can't take care of their family. They lose their job. They're on the verge of losing their home because they are losing their income, etc. And they have really high stress, but the same thing happened to them. So yeah, your response to that between A and B is different. That we're all different, and there's no criticism in either way. But the point of explaining this is that your response is manifested in your body, hormones are released, and it will create pain. It can go even as simple as just having a job with a coworker that stresses you out. And you could take that home every day, and your body starts hurting, you don't sleep well, you're crabby all the time, you're moody all the time, and it all stems from your inability to handle that stress with a coworker. Those things are important to identify, and important if you cannot resolve them on your own, and most of us can't, that you seek out professional advice, whether it be a therapist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, your priest, your neighbor, your friend, your brother. It's important to get that advice and work on it. And it takes work. Just like physical improvement takes work, working in the gym or with your physical therapist or chiropractor, mental health takes work too. And it's very, very important, and it will relay itself in the way that our body feels and our health. It's important.
As someone who, I've done a lot of healing over many years and many chronic conditions, something I find very frustrating that I'm curious on your perspective, because I work very hard to keep a neutral perspective. I'm not on one side or the other. Like, I'm not Western medicine against Eastern medicine, and I feel like you have a good embodiment of that. Is I feel so frustrated when people are having these conversations now. Like, there's information everywhere. I was able to find cervicogenic headaches because of TikTok. Like, that was the only reason. I love that. I love that social media is getting information out. I love that mental health is becoming a conversation. I love that PTSD is becoming a conversation. Like, no hate to that. What I find so frustrating and I don't know how to approach, and I've come to the point now where I just don't say anything, and maybe that's what this solution is when people find out that their lives are stressful, or people find out that they have an anxiety diagnosis or, you know, some body diagnosis, they stay there. Even if they know maybe it's time for me to go to therapy, they're just frozen in fear for whatever reason. Even if they know that they want to exercise, they're frozen in fear. And I'm not perfect about this either, like, by any means. I'm not keeping my habits up fully, but I just find it so frustrating that people see these things, and now it's becoming more apparent. And even, not even on those people's faults, somebody might find out that they have a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, just like when I found out I had a diagnosis of Crohn's disease. And the second I get that diagnosis, my symptoms get worse because that's in my awareness now. I'm not making any sense, am I?
No, you're making a lot of sense.
Okay.
I think a lot of this comes to our culture. Many other cultures throughout the world have a lot of family support, a lot of support from the community. Not to say that we don't, but there are a lot of people that are alone and they don't receive that support. If somebody's feeling down, it's important to go over to them and give them a little support and encouragement, and not just a pat on the back or a handshake. Take some time and sit down and talk to them.
Yeah, that's not taught, how to hold that space.
It's really important. If somebody is down, it's important to encourage them and motivate them and get them to a great place so that they can do the same thing for the next person. But we don't have enough of that. Somewhere along the lines, we kind of lost that. And it is difficult to move when you're feeling depressed or anxious. You start to, hide yourself and build walls up around you. And it's important for us as a people to recognize that and try our best to break that wall down and lift that person up. And that's half the battle. It's kind of like, I know I need to go to the gym. I know I need to exercise, but you don't go because you're not motivated to go. So you wake up the next day, I'm going to go. And you still don't go. And really, all it takes is somebody being able to encourage that person. Listen, just wake up. Set your alarm and wake up. That's first step. Make it easier on yourself and have your clothes ready. So when you wake up, you don't have to think much and you get yourself dressed. Well, you're dressed, you may as well grab your water bottle and go in the car. And hey, you got in the car, just turn the key and make it to the gym and drive there. And now you're finally there in the parking lot. So, well, you may as well go inside. And you've got to take those small gains, those small steps. And it sounds silly that that's how you talk to yourself. And you're finally at the gym and you work out and then you're done exercising and you'll tell yourself, why in the world did I wait so long? And then it becomes a habit and you look forward to going and you don't want to be stopped. And you want to keep going and exercising because your body loves it and it feels good. But if I can bring up something that you mentioned a moment when we first started speaking about acupuncture. A lot of patients will ask me, how does acupuncture work? You're putting needles in people, and how does that actually resolve a shoulder pain? How does it help me sleep? I don't understand it. It is a difficult thing to understand because I studied it for years and it took me that long to try to understand it. And even still, I mean, I have a good understanding, but I'm not a master at it. It takes a few decades to become a master at it. But essentially, acupuncture is the manipulation of energy within the body. What do you mean energy? Well, we have polarity, we carry electricity, we have electrolytes in our body, we have magnetism. I mean, I'm not sure if you're old enough to remember this, but we had the bunny ears antennas on the televisions, and we would send they would send me to go grab the antenna and wave my arm around to try to get better reception. That's because we can carry that type of signal, right? And we can extend that wavelength. So we carry it inside of us and we can manipulate that. And that is exactly what acupuncture does. Think of it as our blood system has arteries and veins. It's pipelines that carry blood throughout our body. We have energy pathways that move in and around our body as well. And if that energy pathway gets stuck and it builds up behind it, it's not going to allow the things after it to be able to function as well as it should. It's like blocking an artery here in the leg, and your foot's going to go numb, and then you start getting things like neuralgia. So it's important to be able to recognize that as an acupuncturist, to find out where the blocked energy is, or that pipeline might be flowing too fast. And it's causing too strong of a flow of energy, so we have to back it down. And we have to find those valves around the pipes that travel around our body, and we want to open them up or close them down. And that's how we can manipulate the energy that travels throughout our body. And then when that energy flows correctly, then the body begins to heal itself. So how is it that I can treat somebody's shoulder who has adhesive capsulitis, frozen shoulder, and I place needles around the shoulder, in the hands, around the hip? How is it that the shoulder improves? Because it does. Okay, that's because the appropriate type of acupuncture was manipulated. The appropriate method of acupuncture manipulated the energy so that their shoulder can heal. Or the person who wanted to quit smoking, or the person who couldn't sleep, or the couple that couldn't have a baby. Those things are treated with acupuncture. The chronic back pain, the sciatic pain, the tennis elbow, all of these things can be treated with acupuncture through manipulating the energy in order for the body to begin to heal itself. And it's pretty amazing how well it works. That's why it's been around for over 5,000 years. And the practitioners that utilized it long time ago found the areas of the body that tend to control certain parts of the body. And then they documented these things. And so now we have a whole practice that can be studied, certified, and licensed to be able to practice that. And by the way, as I mentioned before, as a chiropractor, I'm reading the body with my hands, I'm seeing with my hands. And it is important as an acupuncturist to be in a good place when I'm treating the patient. So the patient may come to me and say, I want to quit this habit. Well, if I'm practicing the habit, how can I help that patient quit that habit? So it's really important that I keep myself well so I can help other patients. That's really important. And as a human being, I just like everybody else, it's a challenge to be able to keep yourself well, sound, and grounded so that you can help everyone else. So I do have my responsibility too.
That's one of the main reasons I started the show, was I finally got off all of my extreme medications. Blood work, although slight improvement, is like great. Just I've been doing very, very well. And I used to own a business that I worked with women, helping them through their anxiety. I taught emotional mastery in other ways, doesn't matter. And that business kept me, taking good habits and taking good action. And I had to set that down. So now I have the wallpaper business, and I knew once I got off those medications, I couldn't be so naive to think that I would never have another flare or maybe end up on a medication again, because what I had was so severe. Like, that's always in my head. And so a big part of wanting to start the show is to have conversations with people like you, and to have people watching it, and to have people coming to me and asking for my help or asking for the guests' help. And I just know, like, for example, I'm gonna out myself here, but I got my hair dyed yesterday, and my hairstylist always has a candy bowl, and we don't eat sugar, we don't bring it in the house. Like, it's not something, very clean diet, cook at home. And I probably had like 10 Tootsie Rolls, and I feel it this morning. And just, I know that sounds, dumb, but those little things and being called up to something higher really just helps me make better decisions, so I won't feel that. And now I'm like, it's a waterfall of, did those 10 Tootsie Rolls, is this why my neck is tight? And so I absolutely understand is what I'm saying. And I don't think there's any better way to hold yourself accountable than to like teach the thing that you're fascinated about. And I've already noticed my dinky show that gets like 80 views, the difference that it makes.
My grandfather, on my father's side, he was 98 years old when he passed. And I admired something about him. He was 92. I remember I was a young boy. He was 92 years old, and he was outside cutting his grass. And I wanted to, as a young kid, 12 years old, I wanted to earn some money, and I asked him if I can cut his grass. And at first, he was a little bit stubborn, because he wanted to cut his grass. And he lived on a hill, and he had a decent sized yard. And at 92, he cut his grass, he shoveled his driveway, and he was a little stubborn that way. But something else that he did is he walked everywhere. He walked to the grocery store, he walked to work. He didn't have much, he didn't own a vehicle. But that walking not only was exercise, but it gave him time to think about his day. It gave him time to meditate while he walked. And when I noticed when things would challenge his patience, his way of getting upset was typically to wave his hand. That was his response. That was his anger. He would do this. He was always a pretty calm guy. And he was always happy, and he smiled, and he worked. And he kept himself grounded. But he wasn't, as far as eating healthy and having healthy habits, he was a human being. He ate steaks, he ate red meat, he ate fat, he would occasionally drink alcohol. I remember catching him smoking cigarettes. Not to say that to go out and do those things. I'm just saying I think the most important part of his health was his mental well-being. He tended to stay calm, and he took the time to reflect on his life every day. When he would take his time to walk to work, walk home, do chores around the house, etc. He didn't let very much bother him. And my grandmother, she was the same way, except she had even more patience. She was the most patient woman I've ever known. And she passed at 87. And I admired her for that. Things could have been falling apart all around the world, and she just stayed calm. She had her way of doing that. And she had her pastimes, and she would meditate, she would crochet. And that was her way of reflecting on her day. If she had a bad day, she would go sit in her chair and she would crochet. And that was her outlet. Or she would bake bread. That was her outlet. So that was their way of seeing their therapist. And they lived very good lives, and they enjoyed themselves, and they stayed calm. I never had the privilege of knowing my maternal grandfather. He passed before I was born. But in any event, the point is that it's important to enjoy your life, to be happy. They had friends, they communed, they had their church, they stayed close to their community. And that's something that, I think we're missing a little bit today. And when our body needs help, if we're out and we injure ourselves, if we have jobs like you said you had a wallpaper business, you're challenging your body frequently. So you offset it by working on your exercises. And then you go to your chiropractor once or twice a month to help maintain that flexibility, maintain your range of motion. And then you go home and you keep it strong. And you do the best that you can to eat well and nourish your body and avoid the things that don't. But when you do, you kind of got to go, I don't do it too often. I'm enjoying a little sweet thing here, but I won't do it tomorrow, the next day, or the day after that. And you enjoy your relationship with your fiance, and you guys are happy. I've always seen you guys together, and you always seem to be enjoying each other's time and partnership. That's really important. And you guys are supporting each other, and you're keeping yourselves in a good mental state. That's really important.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do try to enjoy the things I couldn't enjoy when I was severely sick. Like, I'm not eating anything when I'm severely sick because my life was at stake. And part of that is still like playing in my mind. My issue, and this is off topic of chiropractic, my issue is the addiction. I had a binge eating issue for a while and a sugar addiction for a while. And it's almost like I feel like an alcoholic. Like, I had those few things, and then that's going to lead to more few things. And I've been navigating that lately and seeing a lot of improvements. I don't have a binge eating problem very much anymore, but I do, there is something there that just like stops me from just enjoying it for a day. Yeah, so I try to have that in my mind, and I have been doing a lot better. I think it's just my way of coping with things, and I think that's somewhere where when I have that urge, it's not just like there's candy on the table, I took a few Tootsie Rolls. Will it lead to that like ravenous urge that I need to have something else? And can I just at that moment sit with that uncomfortable feeling? And that's something I've been working on.
Do you find yourself tending to do that when you're emotionally stressed, or you just see it and you like it?
It's both. I figured this out a little bit with my naturopath. Yes, the emotional stress, if I'm feeling specifically overwhelmed, is one side, and the other is when I'm feeling absolutely great. So there's like a celebration thing in there, and then that shadow side is overwhelm.
There's something I'd like to share with you and the audience. It's a concept that I learned from an author who went through the most heinous experience as a child and became a profound human being, and gave this analogy. When there is a storm, like a rainstorm, a thunderstorm, and it blows through, imagine that being like emotions and stress coming your way. So you hear something, you see something, you experience something, and you have a lot of emotional distress. It's like a storm coming through. And you have the trees, the big tall trees. What happens when the wind is blowing and you see those treetops?
Oh yeah, they just like...
Right? They're chaotic, they're blowing around. And that's like our treetop, right? It's chaotic and it's not stable. But what about the tree trunk? It's, for the most part, still, right? The tops are what's moving around, but the trunks are still and stable and embedded in the ground. So he gave the analogy.
How I feel like.
Right? It's such an interesting thing that he taught. And our tummies are like the trunks. So the concept that he taught was when strong emotions come your way, or you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, depressed, in fear, put your mind in your stomach. What that means is concentrate, for example, on your belly button, breathing in and out, and just focus on that and nothing else. Don't think about work, don't think about finances, don't think about your kids, don't think about this, that, the other thing. Just your belly button, breathing in and out. And focus on that for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. Just do that. And you'll recognize that everything starts to get still and the emotions start to calm down and your head becomes more focused. that's when you make a decision. Because you're not thinking emotionally, you're thinking logically. And if it goes away, and it will, or when it goes away, the moment that it starts to come back, put yourself back in your tummy. And you focus on your breathing in and out. And what you're doing is you're developing a habit for yourself to think more logically. And you're developing a habit for yourself to learn how to calm yourself when you experience emotional challenges. And over time, as you practice this, it comes automatic. And it would be very difficult to ruffle your feathers. No matter what comes your way, you can learn to stay calm. And it's much better for your body. You have, if you go back to the Western thinking, less cortisol extraction, less adrenaline, etc. Your body is a lot more stable. And it's much, much healthier for you. And then there's less manifestations of muscle pain, etc., etc. Which, by the way, it's really difficult. Sorry for going on this tangent. Some of the most difficult patients to work with are patients who have fibromyalgia. And the reason is because it's difficult to get them out of that emotional state and help them recognize, like, fibromyalgia is a real thing. The source of the fibromyalgia is difficult for a person or patient to recognize and treat. That's what's hard. I can work with their symptoms and I can help to relax their muscles and get their joints more flexible, but comes back because they're not working on the major source. And that's not every fibromyalgia patient, but it's the greater majority that it's like that.
And the greater source is that emotional
distress.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of books, and I think it was Gabor Maté. Do you know Gabor Maté? I bring him up all the time.
I don't actually.
He wrote this book called When the Body Says No, and it has to do, he's a physician, and through his very long career, he had seen a pattern in disease, and I'm sure this is no new thought to you, but disease isn't chaotic. There's a pattern in personality, there's a pattern in personal history, and underneath all of that is a pattern in not expressing certain emotions. Very interesting. The book is a little dark because he doesn't give a solution, but he then followed it up with a different book that gave a little light to the situation. And I think it was his book I was reading, either that or there's another popular book called The Body Keeps the Score that's somewhat about the same thing. And something about the fibromyalgia chapters, like I could see that in my future. It like worried me. So there's something in there that like spoke to me. And so whether it's true or not, I imagine that I sort of imagine that as a worst case scenario. And it sort of helps me because a lot of that it's like, I mean, the pain and the tension, if you think about that psychosomatically, it makes a lot of sense that they're just like holding on to all this stuff and you're just like storing it in all these different areas. And then eventually your whole body hurts. So that's been a weird little motivation thing for me because I do feel that those emotions get trapped and I've experienced those emotions release and I've helped people release those emotions. And even when I hear you talking about fibromyalgia, I'm like, yeah, I gotta make sure that's not the direction I'm headed for whatever intuitive reason.
Yeah, don't bring that upon yourself.
No.
Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to head in that direction. Not at all.
No, I'm not like focused on it in that way. It's just something that showed up within me as a possibility, almost like in the same way I don't want to think that I'm immune from having another Crohn's flare, which is going to help me keep myself calm and keep myself nourished. Yes, I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And when you talk about your Crohn's flare-up, so you talked about eating well and eating healthy at home and preparing your own foods, etc. That's one of the best things that you could do for Crohn's. Just avoid the foods that that bother you. The common ones like gluten, for example. That's a big one. Mm-hmm. Just keep doing that for yourself and you're going to be fine. And if you do have a flare-up, it'll be short-lived because you're taking care of yourself. And I'm glad that you reached to that. as opposed to quickly reaching for the only alternative, which is injections and medication. For some people, that's the only option they have. But we, as a medical profession, it's not taught strongly enough that nutrition is so powerful. We don't tend to grasp onto that strong enough in our culture. For example, patients are taking a new medication and their provider says, you can't eat grapefruit anymore. Why? Because grapefruit is such a strong detox. It puts a lot of, I'm going to call it stress, on the liver. If a grapefruit can do that, aren't there other foods as well that can be just as strong? Of course there are. We need to use food as a healing agent and forget about the, we need it fixed right now. Because typically
that's the worst thing. They're like, well, it's been a week, I haven't seen any results.
Food isn't going to do that the way synthetics do. And we're trained to think that that's the only thing that's going to heal us. Again, I'm not against synthetics, but I'm definitely for looking at nutrition to heal your body. I have got a personal story with that. My triglycerides were through the roof, as well as my cholesterol. And my provider said, okay, we need to talk about a statin. I says, hold on a minute. I've been misbehaving and I'm going to fix it with my diet first. And then I'd like to come back and get retested. Would you support me with that? Yeah, well, I want to get you back here in no later than 6 months and we'll retest you. Awesome. Went back in 6 months and my triglycerides fell 160 points. And I'm really happy with that. And my provider did give me the advice of also taking fish oils and red yeast rice, which helped to break down and reduce my cholesterol overall and my triglycerides. But I made a significant change in my diet. And these are the kinds of things that we need to be promoting. Thankfully, right, I am thankful and appreciative that I came from a Greek family and I learned how to prepare food really, really well. And I love that and I enjoy that. A lot of people need help learning how to prepare foods at home. And so they say, well, I eat chicken and broccoli, and so I'm eating healthy. But they're not learning that the preparation of the food itself is also just as important. You can't fry the chicken. You can't load it with salt, for example. So it's important. And if I told someone, for example, that steaming chicken could be delicious, they'd probably look at me and turn the TV off and say, you're nuts. But there are ways to be able to prepare foods that are extremely healthy for you and you're not missing out on life. It would be really delicious and I can enjoy it and I know I don't need to put the butter in it. And even though butter can taste delicious, you can learn to enjoy flavorful foods without making them harmful for your body. And there is a reason why we have holidays, right? Of course, you're celebrating the purpose of the holiday, but we have exorbitant amount of food. But how many times a year does that happen? It's not every weekend. It's 2 or 3 times a year. That's why they're special. If we wanted to be a glutton on those 2 or 3 times a year, and not advocating for it, but it's probably not going to make you morbidly obese either. But if we do that every weekend and then wonder why we can't lose weight because we're eating well 5 days a week, but every weekend we're not, that's why. You know, when you're making a change, you have to be aggressive with that change. When you get to a point, then you could reward yourself. And that's also important. Right now, there's, in my opinion, and is just my opinion only, the injections for losing weight is becoming a very, very popular thing at a scary rate. And we're leaning on the next easy thing to lose weight. And I'm really concerned about its long-term side effects. That medication was developed to help patients with diabetes, and it has now turned into a weight loss drug. And I'm concerned about that because our culture is being taught that we can lose weight really easily and just do this. but I'm very concerned about it. As if the population were my family, I would not like to see my family do something the easy way that would be harmful to them in the long term. And hopefully it's not, but I am concerned about it. And that could be a topic for another time.
It reminds me of the same conversation. The weight issue is the similar conversation to the cooking and preparing foods issue, and like how much eating healthy can change your health inside and out. And there's one thing I want to say, we're going to go slightly over, and then I'll let you tell people where to find you, unless you have anything to add. I just want to say this to anybody, and I'm sure we could talk about it for an hour, but when it came to me changing my diet, because I was standard American diet, like Taco Bell, Dr. Pepper, didn't eat consistently. I was working 70 hours a week at a sales job, like just standard American life before I got really sick. And changing that was very challenging for me, where some people can learn the information and that's what they need to see it. They need to have that awareness, and it becomes easy to make those habit changes. I always thought that I was eating healthy until I did learn the facts, and the facts helped. And I think like learning what sugar does to the blood and all of these things really help. But if you are anybody like me, until you can, the way that it worked for me was until I addressed the extreme trauma that had gone in my life and the sexual abuse that had gone in my life, and started to like work through those things, I wasn't going to eat any health. I wasn't going to make those changes. And I think we're caught on because people are like, oh, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. And it's like, okay, well, maybe there's something in your brain that we need to express first. And it's sort of this weaved thing that I did together over time. But like, if there's something blocking you, literally can't do it, there's something in the mind is my thought.
You were very brave, and good for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I do encourage you to find a provider that's going to work well with you. If they're not willing to spend the time that you need and give you the information that you're looking for, that's okay. Just find someone that can do that for you. When it comes to finding a provider that can help you with musculoskeletal needs, chiropractors are a wonderful option, and there are many wonderful chiropractors in the area. If you'd like more information about me or my office, you can certainly find us at my website at myclevelandchiropractor.com here in Brunswick, Ohio. And I thank you for your time.